much you're eating, what you're putting into your system, how late you're eating. So if you're really eating light and you go to bed, say you go to bed 11 o'clock, you'll probably wake up at 3:30 in the morning. Like most of the time I wake up 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning.
I wouldn't mind doing that.
I
think
just
I'd be
wake
more
up
productive during the day every day.
You know, it's really comical.
Yeah.
And I take my dogs. I go to the beach. So, but what I usually do is get out of bed at 5:30, and then I get.
So we talked before, you know, again off camera about one of the big things to do is really about what you leave out of your diet, what you take out of your diet. Right. And so you've seen, I'm sure you've seen, you know, over the last 10, 20, 30 years, really the change in the food, you know, in the quality of food.
Absolutely.
So I mean, what do you think the biggest changes are that you've seen? And if somebody had to, if you had to give somebody like, you know, the 5 foods or the 5 recommendations of what they really need to keep out of their diet, most importantly. I mean, as you said, keep stuff out of your diet as opposed to just what you're putting into it.
Well, the most important, the place that Rory and I are always talking about where you should really begin from is to don't eat any processed food, because it's the processed food that's killing everybody. When we're 31 now worldwide as far as health is concerned, and we're living longer because of technological reasons, more and more bypass surgery, all kinds of technological medical intervention, and we're getting sicker. More and more people, you go to a pharmacy now, you see people lined up, you think they were giving away these, you think it was gold they were giving away for free. Everything's becoming more and more processed now, more and more additives, and now what's happened, people have gotten to the point where in general they're counting completely on if something happens that they can have some kind of intervention that was going to help them to recapture their health. But it doesn't work that way. And one of the saddest things I see is to see people like go into nursing homes that really shouldn't be there. People get sick that really shouldn't be sick. And today when I was talking about that, I really got emotional about it because I really feel bad about that. To see people, especially people you know and that you like, and that you see them to get sick. Now me myself, everybody I grew up with is gone. It shouldn't be that way. Some of the guys I grew up with, man, they were like gorillas, and they got sick because they were eating all this stuff. They thought it was good. You know, a lot of the food we're eating today that people think are healthy are not. It's not healthy. It's, you know, they don't realize there's a lot of things in it that are not good, even though they think it's healthy food. It's not.
I think that's one of the toughest things you see now with is really the misinformation. I mean, you see all the, you know, weight loss plan programs and all the, you know, they send you meals and all this kind of stuff, and it's just all processed foods. You know, you could actually, if you look at the world epidemiologically, you look at all the people that are living a long time, and that's what we do. We do a lot of research, best we can. And we're trying to get into some real research at universities. We have a couple opportunities to work with real researchers, but they all want a lot of money, which we don't have. We wanted to validate what I'm saying, but can we do it? Absolutely, but it takes money. But to look at the world epidemiologically, there's a lot of people that are eating different diets because they're living in pristine environments, and they're becoming fewer and fewer. Eating pristine diets, could be anything. Like when we were in Australia, we looked at the Aboriginal people. They were eating grubs. They were eating all kinds of different things. They were amazingly healthy, but they were very, very, very skinny. They could go out into the outback. We couldn't survive out there. Then you look at the Maoris in New Zealand. They eat totally different. They were eating a lot of animal proteins and everything. They were healthy. The Valapacabambas, the Titicacas in Peru. They're amazingly handsome, good-looking people with teeth, living to be 100. They're eating things. Not everybody's eating the same type of a diet. They're eating different things, but there's the same common denominator. It's clean. There's no chemicals, no hormones. They're not overindulging in anything. They're living under no stress in pristine environments. That is the key, to understand the basic common denominator. The underlying thing is to live a clean life. I mean, actually, I always say this facetiously. I mean, you might be better off eating I'll say a squirrel. I was going to originally say a rat if you catch it out in the yard than some of the commercial chickens you're buying today. Because it's clean. It's a clean animal. You take out the rat was probably eating, you know, some healthy, garbage or something like that, where the chicken's being fed all sorts of garbage.
You know, the funny thing, I have a friend of mine from Mexico, and he's a sweetheart. You know, he comes with me. I walk my dogs in the morning, and his mother sent him from some delicacies from Mexico, and he knows I'm a wild guy, you know. He says, Freddie, I got a couple of delicacies for you. I said, what are they? He said, well, my mother sent us some grasshoppers. He said, they're a delicacy in Mexico. So I didn't want to hurt the guy's feelings because I really liked them. I said, well, yeah, I'll eat them. I would have ate them anyway. That doesn't bother me. And he says, I got some peanuts. I says, all right. I says, are they cooked? He said, yeah, my mother boils the grasshoppers. Now, I probably could have ate them, but I'm walking on an edge all the time with this stuff. A lot of things bother me right away. So I said, gee, I don't know if I could eat them. He said, no, I don't want to cause you a problem. So the peanuts, I said, what about the peanuts? So I didn't want to offend them. I said, okay, I'll eat the peanuts, but they were cooked, you know what I mean? I don't eat them. You know what I mean? It's just, it's so ingrained in me.
Yeah, yeah.
People say, why don't you deviate? It's so ingrained in me. I've been doing it so long, you know?
And unfortunately, most people are ingrained in eating.
I know. But you don't have to. I wouldn't, be honest with you, I don't know if it's a good idea for some people to be in my shoes.
Yeah.
You know, because if something happens to them, have an accident, they might have to decide, you know, if they can take the treatment or not. It's nothing to be frightened of, but it's something that you have to consider.
You mentioned a few minutes ago about research.
Right.
I think we're last Saturday was World Diabetes Day, and it's really one of the big things that we're talking about right now.
Mm-hmm.
World Diabetes Day, it's funded by a whole bunch of drug companies. And I know that one of the tough things that there is in terms of getting good health information out there, and I've talked to Dr. Gabriel Cousins about those, who's wanted to do more research, is the funding behind it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the so-called health information that's out there is really about, well, who's funding those projects? Who's funding that and putting that together to make it work?
We got the best researchers, the biggest universities.
Yeah.
We got the best people.
But it's tough to get people to pay for it.
They want the money. And I was just speaking to this one guy, and he wants to work with me. He says, Freddie, because he was talking about they studying caloric restriction, you know, and I know where the problem is. They're eating too much protein. Protein is the problem. IGF-1 doesn't come down. It won't come down. I says, you got to reduce the protein. He said, I think you're right. I said, I don't want to sound like arrogant. I said, I'm telling you, that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
So what happened, he says, well, I like to collaborate with you. He said, I like to do the research with you. He says, but you got to come up with the money. So I said, how much money? He said, how much money you got? Well, I didn't like that. How much money you got? I said, what is this here? You know?
Yeah.
So, but he says, well, you need at least $100,000. Now, these other people, really, you know, big time university, they're talking about $1 million. What was it, about $1 million, $1.5 million? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we don't have that kind of money. Yeah. You know? He's the guy that makes all the contacts. He's the guy that does all this, you know. So, but I lose my patience with some of this stuff, you know what I mean? I don't know what the reason is for that, because it's so sad. So many people could be helped, you know, and a lot of people are not going to go overall, but we could still help them. Yeah. Just by starting with telling them, don't eat no processed food, eat a plant-based diet, plenty of fruits and vegetables, buy yourself a juicer, you know. Yeah. You know, and then eat some cooked food. And I have plenty of people come to me and say, Freddie, I got to eat some animal protein. I say, okay, I put in this proper content in the diet. I give them the antidote before I give them the quote the poison. It's very easy to do that. Yeah. You know, you're kind of using like an eraser. So you give them a glass of juice or salad, let them have some steamed vegetables, then you give them 4 ounces of fish or something like that, or some fresh food. And it works. It works all the time.
Yeah. I think, for one, I wish I could have filmed, you know, we've been sitting here talking for a couple hours about a whole bunch of topics. I wish we could have filmed that all and shared that with everyone. Right. But I think, you know, you make a couple of really important points, and I'd love to hear what everyone else's, what came up for the rest of you in listening to this. You know, I'd love to, if you could leave your comments below, I'd love to hear that. But you talk about, really the big thing is what you're not putting into your diet.
That's everything.
That's everything.
The human body has remedial capabilities that is amazing.
Yeah. So
if you give it half a chance, if you let it breathe, if you know what I'm saying, it'll do the job.
So if you're gonna, you know, if you have trouble with going vegan, well, at least have, you know, good organic quality meat or a good organic quality fish.
Or grass-fed, not
grass-fed.
organic. Organic's got too much fat, too much more. Grass-fed.
Grass-fed. You know, and if you're gonna, you know, start eating better, it's about the source of the food that you're getting it from.
You know, some people that in the raw food movement get upset when they hear me say that. Well, I'm sorry about that. Yeah. But I don't believe in cloning everybody. Yeah. And I've been out in the trenches now for, you know, 40 so years, and I've seen some great results. I know what the bottom line could be.